being built on this narrative. Should India be really bothered, or it should just go ahead with its developmental activities, both domestic as well as international?
Oh, India should be bothered about this. It is a real problem. It's a problem because governments may feel pressure not to cooperate with India. If you think of the Quad, the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue is a alignment of countries that share democratic values. Well, if India is now an electoral autocracy and it's not a democracy, will other governments be comfortable working with India in the Quad? Will the US Congress be comfortable approving sales of defense hardware to India? Will companies feel comfortable investing in India when they know that activist investors may pull out reports like this and say, how can you be investing in a country that has these serious human rights abuses? Will investment funds here in Australia, investment funds are largely in the hands of superannuation funds that invest on behalf of savers in Australia, and those funds have a strong commitment to ethical responsibilities. Well, will they feel comfortable investing in a country that they've heard has such serious problems? So this is a problem for India. It's unjust that it's a problem, but the reality is that India should be addressing these problems head on instead of simply saying that we don't respect these organizations, or these are all lies, or there's a conspiracy against India. Much better to confront the flawed data with actual accurate data. That's what I've tried to do in my own research, to bring in accurate data to counter the I think mendacious data I've seen. I mean, I keep disparaging his data. Let me just give you one example. When it comes to violence against journalists in India, we all read that more journalists have been killed in India than in any other country outside China. There's no data for China. Well, that sounds awful until you get down into the numbers. If you normalize for the size of population, India has 1.4 billion people. Deaths of journalists in India were 3.5 journalists per billion. Deaths in the rest of the world outside India were 6.3 per billion. So in other words, India is relatively one of the safer places you can be in the world as a journalist. Now, I'm talking to a journalist right now. Every death of a journalist is one death too many. None of us want to see, I mean, all of us want that figure to be 0 deaths of journalists. But when you normalize for population, I saw a similar report, not part of the democracy rankings, regarding Uttar Pradesh and the number of journalist deaths in Uttar Pradesh over the last, I think it is 8 years that Yogi Adityanath has been chief minister, and it sounded horrific. The journalist deaths and attacks on journalists, until you realize that Uttar Pradesh has 205 million people. Compare the violence against journalists in Uttar Pradesh to that against journalists in comparable areas of the world, Nigeria with a similar GDP per capita, or in Indonesia, which has twice the GDP per capita, or more than twice, about 4 times the GDP per capita of Uttar Pradesh. And then the numbers look pretty ordinary, or if not even good. And as a comparative social scientist, this is something I'm always telling people. The number in itself means nothing. We have to have appropriate comparisons. Now, not adjusting for the size of population is a simple trick. And whoever put the numbers out there knew very well that if they adjusted for size of population, India would look safe, not dangerous. And so they chose the statistic that made India look dangerous. My problem with the international rankings organizations is that although they do have to rely on the advice of experts, and they would try to take expert opinions seriously, when they see evidence like this cited, it should immediately throw up a red flag. Why aren't they adjusting for population? It's such an obvious thing to do that any editor should have seen that and pushed back against the figure. The fact that the rankings organizations did not push back against these kind of figures is, I think, evidence of a lapse of judgment. Not evidence of a conspiracy against India, but evidence of an excessive credulity and a lack of responsibility, taking responsibility for their own figures. Something the Indian government could do is the Indian government could make an effort to create a statistics portal that systematically collects and publishes statistics in a more timely way. Unfortunately, all of these statistics that are critical of India, whether on journalist deaths, on sedition charges, on UAPA, on arrests made under the UAPA, all of these very seemingly condemnatory statistics are collected by NGOs for their own political purposes to try to make a case. The government doesn't publish these data in an easily accessible form. Organizations are going and doing the research, doing the hard work. I mean, it is hard work to compile court records from 10 years and put them together. So these organizations are doing the hard work, and then they're spinning it how they like. They're using
Want.
it in support of their political agendas. Now, if the government were to do the hard work for us, social scientists like me would be thrilled, to have official sources of statistics that we could then use in our research. Now, I'm not saying the government should have its own counter narrative. I don't think it's the role of a government to have a narrative about such things. But if the Indian government wanted to counter these narratives, the most effective way always is sunlight. Just bring data and sunlight into things and let that take care of it. Now, I must stress, other countries also do not collect such statistics. If you want statistics on deaths of journalists in the United States, you also have to go to an activist organization. The government doesn't publish it. So I'm not blaming the government of India for somehow being behind in making data available. But if India wants to, or even needs to go the extra mile in order to clear its record, well, I think it would be probably money well spent by a government to make data more readily available.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.